Good evening and good Chodesh. Welcome to our Rosh Chodesh share. And it's very delightful that we can actually have it on Rosh Chodesh, not always the way, and especially Rosh Chodesh Adar, what can be better? And it's a real privilege, both personal and as far as the share, to having Rabbi Benjy Morgan on. The title of the share is Finding Light. And I think Rabbi Morgan is the person that discovers light where it doesn't exist and illuminates the path for so many people that they can find the light as well. It really is, could not be more appropriate title to describe Rabbi Morgan. Rabbi Morgan is the entrepreneurial head of the JLE, soon to be Olami, has made a wonderful difference to the killer in all the initiatives that the JLE do and continue to do. Comes from a great family where he's seen it at home, and he carries on the Morgan mantra in a very, very beautiful way. And we are all affected by his wonderful Avodas HaKodesh. So what could be nicer than hearing somebody who is not only somebody who's a doer and a maker, he's a master and he's an oiser, he's an inspiring individual, and he is a wonderful, I've heard him speak as well, so we know we're going to have a great half an hour or so share and be inspired for Chodesh Adar. This share is Lilu Nishmas, Jacqueline Kurz and Yechoed Bar Savrom, who we think about Midei Chodesh V'Chodesh, can only come to us each month because of the efforts of Shlomi Goldmeyer and Daniel Guinness, and we're grateful to them as much as the EAYC for hosting this. And Bez Hashem, we should continue to be inspired by the memory of Jacqueline, but at the same time, the knowledge that each month goes by, we have another wonderful character and inspiring individual from Klal Yisrael to grace us. And definitely, this is a wonderful example of it. Baruch Hashem, we are very blessed in Klal Yisrael, and particularly benched that we've got Rabbi Morgan in our midst. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Really appreciate that intro, especially as I think my mother is on the call, so she definitely appreciates it. So thank you very much. And it's good to see familiar faces, and thank you to everyone who arranged the shir. And shout out to even some JLE Talmidim, which are on here. People have heard many shirim, and it's great to see you here with your extended mishpachas as well sometimes. So really, the idea is, I think they said it's not more than 2 hours, right? Over the course of the next, what is it, 24, 26 minutes, to explore what our avodah is during this time. So it's funny because everyone's busy with Tisha B'Av. We have so many Tisha B'Av films and so much chizuk during Tisha B'Av, and then when it comes to Adar, you don't find anyone puts out a Purim film. But actually, Mishenichnas Adar Marvin B'Simcha. This is a time of real growth. Simcha is growth. Simcha is happiness, and we need to understand what it is to really truly be happy. What is our avodah? What is it that we're supposed to be thinking about during this time now as we enter this month, which is essentially the climax of our year, because it's the pinnacle. The beginning of the year starts the calendar year, and all the Yom Tovim begins in Nisan, and this is the climax. The Purim is going to be the climax in the middle of Adar, when the strength of the Mazal of the Adar is the strongest. That's when the climax of all the Yom Tovim are. And I guess tonight, maybe perhaps the purpose of the discussion is to kind of look at and see what is our avodah, what are we supposed to be thinking, what's the energy we're supposed to be tapping into, how can we apply it to our everyday lives, and really tap into the simcha that we're told Mishnichnas Adam Arvin B'Simcha. So I was in JLE this morning davening Shachris, and someone usually speaks after Shachris and says a Dvar Lacha, and that person wasn't there, so they said, Rabbi Morgan, would you say something? And luckily I remembered something which I heard from one of my Rabbeim, Rabbi Leib Whitler, which I think is a good way to start. It's interesting that when it comes to Chanukah, our most recent Yom Tov, we know that the Yevonim, they abolished they didn't allow Yidden to observe the mitzvah of Bris Milah. They didn't allow them to observe the mitzvah of Shabbos, which it makes a lot of sense. But they also abolished Rosh Chodesh, which it was always a strange one for me. Rosh Chodesh, a lot of Jews, even semi-frum Jews, if you ask them when's Rosh Chodesh, they wouldn't know. They find out maybe in shul. but it's not something which is like you've got to get ready for Rosh Chodesh. To me, when I was 16, 17, and I asked my Rabbi this question, I was like, if we didn't have Rosh Chodesh, we would still be able to daven, we'd still have Shabbos, we'd still have Bris Milah, we'd still have Yom Tovim and Tekiyas and Shofar and Lulav. So Rosh Chodesh wouldn't be there. And he just answered me in a typical fashion with very few words, but just in a beautiful way. And he said, Benjy, he said, never underestimate the koyach, the power of his chadjus, of renewal. Underneath JD right now we're doing building work, so it's not there. But and soon it will be again. Underneath JD we used to have this gym that always on January 1st, or actually January 2nd when it reopened, there was a line outside, round the corner of people with their New Year renewals. And by the time it came to the 20th of Jan, there wasn't that line, and many people have just got signed up to a subscription and wondering why the subscription to the gym didn't help them help them lose weight. So ultimately, when we live our lives with renewal once a year, which for many years, and unfortunately, that's what the Yiddishkeit is today. Halavai, even that. But for if we live our lives where with his chadshus and the time when we think about renewal is only once a year, then we will end up like those people that year after year sign up for the gym and then a month later it's gone. The koyach of his chadshus that Rabbi Leib was talking about to me, which is what the Yevonim understood is the secret of our survival, is of course we've got the big things like Bris Milah, and of course we've got Shabbos, but really the secret of our survival has been in the fact that we pick ourselves up again and again, and regardless of what happens in 1 month, we have a Yom Kippur Cotton, we have a Rosh Chodesh, and we start again. So that is what we're tapping into. It's a renewal. It doesn't matter where you're up to in the year. It doesn't matter that it's 6 months since Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Chodesh. Adar is a time for renewal, a time for a reset. So what are we resetting? So it's very interesting when it comes to Purim, which manifests in what Adar is all about. Purim, we're told that Chayav Inish Livasumi ad delayota bein Oraham and the Baruch Mordechai, which happens to be the same gematria numerical value, but that's not what you're supposed to be doing when you get drunk. You're not supposed to know the difference between Cursed be Haman and Blessed be Mordechai. What is it that is so strange about the Jewish people that when you think about this for a second, really, I would have expected Chazal to say something else. When it comes to learning Torah, it says, Emer l'chochma choisiyat. The Gemara in Kedushin says, you should say to wisdom that you are my sister. Says the Gemara in Kedushin, what do you mean, like you're my sister? It says that if someone if someone wakes you up in the middle of the night, al tagamgam, don't get confused and be unsure. In the same way, if someone says, can you marry your sister? You say, absolutely not. It doesn't matter if it's 2:30 in the morning, you've hardly slept, you can't. That's how your relationship with Torah wisdom should be. So surely we should be so clear on our Molech, we should be so clear on Haman, we should be so clear on evil and how destructive it is, that you would never, however drunk you get, you would never say, I don't know whether to bless Haman or curse Haman. You should really say, I know that Haman is bad. Yet we're told the mitzvah on Purim is to start seeing that Haman may be blessed. Maybe you should bless Haman, I'm not sure. I can't see the difference. What is the pshat in that? Also, we find that there's a day in the calendar which is Yom HaKippurim. We come across a similar thing on Yom, which is actually, if you look at the words of Yom Kippur, it's Yom Kippurim. It's a day like Purim. On Yom Kippur, we're told a very strange thing, that if you do Teshuvah Me'ava, and you do a real Teshuvah that comes not out of fear but out of love, Hashem will erase your Averas. But not only do your Averas get erased, they turn into Zechuyas. They turn into merits. So someone's got into debt at the bank. It's not the bank says, we will write off your debts. No, they'll say, listen, that minus sign? We'll just put a little cross through it, and now that is a plus sign. Why does Hashem do that for us? And that is a day, Yom Kippurim. Why is it like Purim? In what way is it similar? So here we come to something which I think is pertinent to all our lives. It sounds philosophical, but it's actually so practical. And each of us live through this every single day. The Torah says that Shlomo HaMelech says this, actually. Shlomo HaMelech says that my Yisroin lechochma min aksil, that what do we find which is more, what do I find which is greater? Why is wisdom greater than foolishness, than folly? So the Zohar asked the question, what you need Shlomo HaMelech to tell me that wisdom is greater than foolishness? Like, that is obvious. Even a 5-year-old child knows that foolishness is greater than wisdom. The Zohar reveals in the next chapter as he goes through, that sorry about that. The Zohar reveals that a very interesting and important point that actually is pertinent to all our lives. And it says like this. This is the way I'll explain it. There's something called Aristotelian logic. It's how we live all our lives. It's how Aristotle lived his life. What Aristotelian logic dictates is that his 3 principles is that A is not non-A, A is not B, and cannot be simultaneously A and B, which basically means I'm not you, you are not me, and I would still exist even if you didn't exist, and I could live my life very happily without you. And it's the way that capitalism works, and most of the world works, and most of the Western world thinks. There's something called paradoxical logic, which seems strange to us, but the Zohar introduces it here from Shlomo HaMelech in Parashat Tazria, and he says like this. It says, if the whole world was sweet, would things really be sweet? If all of the world was light and it couldn't get dark, would there be such a thing as dark? What makes the sweet sweet and the dark dark? It's the fact that there can be dark, therefore there can be light. It's the fact that things can be sour, therefore they can be sweet. And this is called paradoxical logic, because if you think about it like this, there's a very famous drawing that is often people use as a when they test if an optical illusion. They show you this picture of 2 faces and a cup, and they say to you, what do you see? Do you see 2 faces of a cup? And people say, what do you really see? So someone in the room will say, no, it's 2 faces. Another person says it's a cup. What is it? The answer is it's simultaneously both. In fact, those 2 white faces with the black cup in between say, wouldn't it be great if the whole world was white? Actually, if that whole piece of paper is white, they cease to exist. Says the Zohar that Shlomo HaMelech is telling us a very deep thing. That Shlomo HaMelech is not saying that Chochmah is greater than Ksil, but he's saying that wisdom and something wise can only be said with thanks to the Ksil. It's only because there's such a thing as foolishness, therefore we can appreciate wisdom. In fact, that's why many rabbis will start off a shir with a joke. It's called the Milsa de B'dichusa. The Gemara says that when you start off, you start with a joke. Why? Just to get people interested? Is no. It's the contrast of having something which is a joke and laughing, and then you appreciate the wisdom. In fact, we're told that Beis Hillel, the halach is like Beis Hillel. Says the Gemara, why do we say the halach is like Beis Hillel? Because they were makdim divrei Beis Shammai le Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai used to get up and say, this is our opinion. We have an opinion. But Beis Hillel, what would they say? They would say, this is what Beis Shammai say, but we say this. Now that's very nice, and it's very kind, it's good manners, but we're trying to get to halacha. Why would you say halacha is like him? We're trying to get to emes. So I heard from one of my Rabbeim the following idea. It's because Beis Shammai was saying their opinion. It was like, in this language we're using, it's almost like Aristotelian logic. My opinion stands on its own. I'm giving you my pshat. Beis Hillel understood, or they came closer to the emes because they understood, like what Shlomo HaMelech says, is that first I'm going to tell you the other side, the opposite to my idea, and only then my idea stands. That's closer to emes. That's closer to shleimus. That's closer to oneness. So because they were makdim divrei Beis Shammai to divrei Beis Hillel, therefore the halach is kamoisav. It's not because they were nice. It wasn't Derek Harris. It wasn't a midas tovus thing. It's because then you're seeing the full picture. Through that, you come closer to halacha, to emes. Someone who can't see in business the other side of the story is going to very, very quickly fail in their business endeavors, because they only see what it is that they want. In fact, just the other day, my 4-year-old was here, and I brought back from a trip some licorice for him, and he had wanted another sweet that the 10-year-old had. So this was his first negotiating experience, and he said he asked him if he wants to give him his blue licorice for Yar is my 10-year-old, Yona is my 4-year-old. So Yona turns to Yar and he says, "Can I have a blue licorice, one of your blue licorice, and I won't give you anything. So Yair says, what do you mean? You've got a whole packet of red licorice. He says, why don't we swap? He says, no, I don't want to swap. He says, you know what? Let me go to my drawer and see if there's something else that I can give you. So he comes out with something that clearly my 10-year-old was not interested in. And I said, Yona, you're not thinking, like, maybe offer Yair something that he wants. And he says, yeah, he says, but I don't want to do that. He says, I don't want this thing in my drawer. And I said, Yona, you've got to see it from Yair's perspective. Otherwise, you're not going to negotiate. And this is a 4-year-old who's starting to learn the world and instead of seeing everything from his perspective, understand that if you want a blue licorice, you have to understand what the person who's got the blue licorice might want from you. It's seeing the full picture. Now, we do apply that in our lives, but the secret of a good marriage, the secret of a good relationships is understanding that even as another opinion, which I vehemently disagree with, that actually forms and shapes my opinion. And you see this, for example, in politics in America today, the polarization, and we're not that far behind in this country, is that the polarization and the challenge with cancel culture in the left is that they say we are right on the left and will cancel anyone who says the opposite. Beis Hillel are saying, no, the opposite. You want the opposition to your opinion, or if you're looking for MS, you'll be able to fight for it and you'll be able to show it, but you want to be able to say, this is why this is Sheker and this is MS. If everything is MS and there is no Sheker, then it ceases to exist. In fact, that is the pshat on Yom Kippur, why the Zchuyos Anasis, like, the Zdonos Anasis, like Zchuyos, the sins turn into Zchuyos, because the secret of life is like this. The secret of life is that the Yidden came much, much closer to Hashem on Yom Kippur after having the Chet HaEgel than had they not had it. They always say, when is the real test to a marriage? Not the day of the chuppah. People say that's the best day of your marriage. Well, actually it's not. The best day of marriage is when you know that you can get into a disagreement and still find harmony. That's what happened. Now, the disagreement wasn't great that we had, and the mistake we made with the Egel was not great. But the test of a real relationship is not whether it can get off to a good start. It's the test of, against the backdrop of brokenness, can light still be found? And if that is, then that's the celebration of Yom Kippur. That is the celebration of finding the light that only exists within the darkness. I always say it's a bit like on these phones. If you take out your phone and you put this light on, then the amount of light that it shines in a room which is lit, is very little. Any candle which is lit in a brightly lit room, if you make a candlelit dinner and against the backdrop of darkness you bring that light, that is when beauty is really found. That is the koyach of Or. That is what it means to bring light to the world. It is actually through that understanding of paradoxical logic and this Zohar, Parashas Tazria, that we can understand all of life, and it will come through to Purim as well, and to Adar. Why? Because most people in their lives, and I'm including myself in this, we often wish away the challenges. We wish we wouldn't have pain. We wish we wouldn't have challenge. We wish we wouldn't be faced with the nisyonos, or the things that we are facing. And every person who's on this Zoom and every person who I meet today and tomorrow and the day after will have a challenge that they're facing that day. And if they're not, then either they're not aware or they're not alive. It's every person has challenges. We all have challenges. The funny thing about the social media world today is that everyone's trying to portray the as if they have the perfect life, but actually and in my study here, I hear so many stories of people who have seemingly perfect lives and who are really in so much deep pain. And in my work in JD, I get to meet some extraordinarily wealthy people. In fact, we had a Friday night dinner here with someone who just sold his business for $3.75 billion dollars, $3.75 billion. But it's fine. At that number, it doesn't make a difference. He's still got enough to eat. And he came to our Friday night dinner, and his son had married out, and he was divorced. And he came and he saw our Shabbos table, and he walked through the door. He'd never been to our house before, and he saw the kids and lined up and said, "Good Shabbos." And he turned to his non-Jewish daughter-in-law who was with him, and he said, "This is real wealth." And the idea is that we think, oh, this person's got so much money, right? If only I had even a fraction of the money, all my problems would go away. Everyone has problems. Everyone has challenges. That's what we face. And the question is, what do we do with those challenges? I heard a beautiful thing. I learn with Rabbi Zimmerman every week, and he told me just recently this beautiful thing, that the idea of a challenge, the word in Hebrew for challenge is mashper, which is a crisis or a challenge. The word for a birthing table where a woman gives birth is mashper. the challenges that we have in our life, instead of wishing them away and hoping to be ideally living with a pina colada on the beach with no issues, no daigers, no worries of Rotzi Yaakov Leishiv B'Shalva. This goes back generations of just, can we not just have some manucha for a second, is a misunderstanding of what the birthing table is. It's the crisis, it's the challenges that give birth. It's the darkness of the room that gives birth to the light. And it's the sour moments in our life that allow us to taste the sweet. And it's that galgal that we give an oval of the lentils or the eggs that remind us of, like, whatever goes around it. We live in this constant paradox. And it's actually only through feeling pain and sitting shiva that we can feel a simcha. It's if someone buries that pain or denies that pain, then they all, in a certain way, are denying the other side of the pendulum. They will never be able to feel the simcha. Mishenichnas adam marbin besimcha. What is simcha? Simcha is simcha in the outside world is there's a misunderstanding of what happiness is, but true simcha is not a life with no pain, because unless you are living in a life of escapism or alcoholism or substance abuse and escaping it and all sorts of addictions that drive people are looking for what they think is simcha. True simcha cannot be found in a place of no pain. True simcha is when we find a way to channel that pain to give birth to the next chapter in our lives. And there's a very famous motivational speaker called Nick Vujicic, who's got no arms and no legs. And he says that he spent his first 20 years of his life, he's not Jewish, but he says he spent his first 20 years of his life feeling so sorry for himself because he was born with no arms and no legs, and why me, and why does the rest of the world have it easy? And then he realized, you know what, this is what he's been given, he's going to make use of it, and he's now one of the most well-paid motivational speakers globally, and he walks into schools and universities and communities and talks without arms, without legs, and he shines an amazing light. And I often think to myself, imagine if he did have arms and legs and was saying the exact same things. How powerful would his speech be? It's only because he has this challenge. It's only because he's figured out how to take that mashper, that crisis, that challenge, and turn it into light, is how impactful he is. And that is what makes us beautiful. You know, there's a beautiful Japanese pottery called kintsugi, and what it is it's broken pottery that most people would disregard, and they glue it back together with a golden glue. And you can look at this up online. It's a beautiful pottery that sells for a lot of money. And if their pottery would not be broken, it wouldn't be the same. It's because it's been broken and they figured out how to put that golden glue between it that it has such value. And that is what we are supposed to be. We come to this world chasing perfection without realizing that the perfection is found within the imperfection of everyday's challenges. That's every day when we can find and shine the light. If you go to the gym and it's easy and it's pina colada day, you haven't been to the gym. When we go to our spiritual gym every day, we find a way to harness that power and to shine it even greater light. That is when we've started shining light. And that is the light of Purim. Baruch Haman. What did happen to Haman? You look at what happened October 7th, for example, and the total dispute culture that was in Israel at the time, and the machloikas and the feeling of disparity, and suddenly October 8th and places in Tel Aviv which had, been so upset and demonstrated against people davening on Yom Kippur were suddenly castrating their kitchens so that the from units in the army could have kosher food. So what is it that Hamas did? What is it that Haman did? Haman, with his signet ring, was able to bring a light to the world that even the Nevi'im and all the Rabbanim through the ages wasn't able to bring. They were able, by saying Lahashban Argul Abid, we realized, you know what? We're one people, we're one unity, we're going to get through this together. And unfortunately, it's often only against the background of that darkness that we've been able to shine a light. Mishnichnas Adom Marbin Besimcha is that we were asked, don't wait for that to be able to, don't wait for the tragedies in order for us to be able to find it. Find every day a small challenge in your life through which you can shine an even greater light. And it's interesting because just it's about 6 years ago when I was very sick and I was told by the doctors that I needed a very serious brain operation for a brain abscess, otherwise I was going to die. And I remember lying in the hospital that moment and thinking to myself, what does Hashem want from me now? And I think we all have those moments. Now, luckily I was in a hospital bed and I had time to think and I couldn't do anything else. But I think that, for me, the darkness of those moments of when I took out my phone and I said goodbye to each of my kids in case I wasn't going to survive the operation and film myself saying goodbye to each of those kids, it has given me a feeling that every Friday night when I come home and I give a bracha to my kids, it gives me this feeling of appreciation that I can stand there and that video never needed to be played. And that is the darkness of a moment. I could still say, why did Hashem put me through that? We don't know the reason why Hashem puts us through those nisyonos. What we do have a choice is, how are we going to frame that? What's it going to give birth to? All the brachas we say of gratitude in the morning are all poikeach ivrim. It's all the inverse of what we don't have. Hashem, who gives sight to the blind, who didn't make me this. Why is it so negative? Because the Chazal understood that sometimes we just need to close our eyes in order to appreciate what it is to have them open. Sometimes we need to, hurt our big toe and appreciate what it is to be able to walk without pain. It's often throughout our lives that we wait for the moments of brokenness. And the Mishnechnas Adam B'Simcha is begging us at his chadshus is, don't wait for the brokenness. Appreciate the beauty that you have. Think back to the darkness through the year, and now let's spend a month of simcha of using it for growth. Now, there's just one caveat I need to say, that when someone hears this idea of paradoxical logic, as we discussed it tonight, then people say, wow, that's amazing. If a couple can get so much closer against the backdrop of darkness and of trouble and of egel, maybe I should go and upset people or break the world, because look at this beautiful Kensuki pottery, what comes out from the light. And that, the Rambam says, it's actually very tempting. In fact, there are many great people that understood this, and they went into the darkness in order to bring out light. And the reason why we're not allowed to do that is because you may not come back. There's enough challenges in our lives, enough brokenness in our lives, we're not supposed to go looking for it. But it is tempting, because it's almost saying, wow, look how close we are after this argument. Maybe we should have an argument once a month. You're not allowed to do that. The Rambam says, if you're saying, I'm going to do this, why do you think Echte v'Oshav? It's because you've understood this principle. Not because, I'll do Teshuvah. It's because Echte v'Oshav, look how close I am to Hashem now. It's Ne'ilah. You know what? Next day, let's do a really big Aveira, and then I'm going to be even closer to Hashem next year. And look, the Zonis, this minus was minus 1,000. If I do Teshuvah on a minus 1,000,000, could you imagine what the plus is going to look like? We're not allowed to think that way. Hashem says every person has the Nisyonos in their life. Don't go and seek it out. But being that we all are living a real world of pain and challenge means that we should use the month of Adar is to figure out how to use that pain, to channel it to bring even greater light to the world. And if we do that, then we can be Zoicha that this year, we'll be finishing this year, B'Nissan Nikolu, B'Nissan Esidin Ligal. We should see a year of Yeshua's and the Mashiach Zekenu, B'Meher V'Yameinu. Amen.
Wow, wow, wow. What a share and what an inspiration. So we've gained a lot. We've also learned how, if you want to become a negotiator later life, Yona and Yair have been taught from an early age of how to do it. So that's definitely something. But quite honestly, we have learnt this paradoxical logic, which I've never heard of, but I think it's something which is really beautiful all round, and definitely inspires us and gives us the idea of course, the message of Purim. And Bez Hashem will continue to inspire everyone, including ourselves. There's on the chat the ability to keep knowing about our Shurim Midei Chodesh B'Chodshoy, and we look forward to welcoming everybody for the Rosh Chodesh Nisan one. But it's going to be very hard, Rabbi Benjy, to beat this one. This is one that's going to remember, and we're going to use, and we're going to, and we're definitely.
Thank you for listening.
And definitely be inspired, and Bez Hashem, we should continue to all the koichas that you've got for Klal Yisrael's sake, and I think that's the real example. Rabbi Morgan is somebody who could have gone anywhere in any form, in any tchum, and he's used his koichas for Klal Yisrael, and for that we are, as a kiddo, ever so grateful. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks
a lot. Thank you. Bye bye.